Good evening and welcome to the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning meeting for February 12th. Will you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Alrighty, roll call please.
Chairman Thwaite is absent. Vice Chairman Fikes.
Here.
Commissioner Springer.
Here.
Commissioner McIntyre.
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Halstead.
Here.
Commissioner Askin. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. And it looks like we have election of chair and vice chair. Clerk, do we want to do that now or? Yes. Anybody like to place nominations for a chairman?
Vice Chair. I'd like to nominate Jeff Thwaite as the chairman.
Second. Vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Diane Fyfus as the vice chair.
I'll second.
Alrighty then. Any objections? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for approval?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
A second?
I would second that.
Thank you. And can I get a motion for a consent agenda approval?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. And excused absences, I see none. Brings us down to item number F1. Excuse me, I skipped ahead. C, scheduled public comment. Excused absences is going to be Jeff Thwaite, Chairman Jeff Thwaite. Approval of minutes for January 22nd. And item number C, scheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to speak to anything that is not on the agenda? Seeing none. Unscheduled public comment. Alrighty, consideration of plats, we have none, so that brings us to public hearings. F1, we have before us a resolution PZ 2020-03, an application for a conditional use permit to operate a recreational vehicle park located at 2301 Bowpicker Lane, Kenai, Alaska, and further described as Track 1, Kenai River Shore Subdivision. The application was submitted by Ronald Hyde Jr. on behalf of PRL Logistics. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fikes. So we have an application for a recreational vehicle park. The staff report for this agenda item starts on page 9. The applicant states he would construct an RV park to operate in the 2020 season for approximately 40 to 60 RV sites, 15 tent sites, and there would also be a small office or camp store with some extra parking for vehicles, boats, and possibly trailers. There's a drawing that was included with the application that shows the proposed layout. And then there are 6 criteria for reviewing conditional use permit applications that I'll go through quickly that were included in the staff report. So the first one is that the use is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning district. And I'll talk about numbers 1 and 2 because number 2 is that the value of the adjoining property and neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. And there's a map on, let's see, page 32 of the packet that shows the zoning, and it also shows some of the aerial imagery that shows what's surrounding the parcel that's proposed for the RV park. So the parcel is near South Beach, where there's already a high amount of seasonal camping related to the personal use dip net fishery. The parcel is within the heavy industrial zone. There's still some buffer property between this parcel and an adjacent rural residential neighborhood that would not be developed for the RV park. And you'll note the city boundary is to the west of Bow Picker, so that's why there's no zoning southwest of Bow Picker. The map also, or the aerial imagery also shows the Cannery Lodge. There's already some high seasonal activity there with visitors, and there's several conditional use permits that are issued for the parcels for the Cannery Lodge. And then there's also conditional use permits for an airstrip. I listed all the various uses in the staff report because there's several. And then there's also one immediately to the northwest for Hillcorp for a drilling pad. So basically to the north, east, and west of this parcel, there's conditional use permits for activity for commercial and industrial uses. So I wrote that the criteria for number 1 and 2 to issue the conditional use permit is met. 3 is that the use is in harmony with the comprehensive plan, and I just noted some of the goals that I thought applied, particularly economic development and land use. 4, public services and facilities are adequate, so access would be via Cannery Road, which connects to the Kenai Spur Highway. That road is maintained by the Kenai Peninsula Borough. And I did talk to the Public Works Director, and he didn't think there would be a problem with any potential additional use by recreational vehicles on that road. And then 5 is that the proposed use would not be harmful to public safety, health, or welfare. And so for that criteria, I talked about the proposed bathroom facilities. In the application, there's a photo of the buildings that are proposed to serve as bathroom facilities for the first 1 to 2 years of operation. And criteria 6 is that is any recommended or any conditions the commission deems are necessary to have the conditional use permit fit into the zone that it's being issued for. So I'm recommending the bathroom facilities that there's a set time limit in that the city would have to have an approved plan for more permanent bathroom facilities after the first 2 years of operation. So I'll just go through, I'll just read into the record the proposed conditions for the conditional use permit that I'm proposing. So I recommend the Commission approve this conditional use permit application for a recreational vehicle park subject to the following conditions. 1, the applicant would comply with federal, state, and local regulations. That one would cover any DEC regulations for disposing of waste and providing clean water. 2, that the applicant would submit a landscape site plan. So that will be required before land clearing activities on the parcel according to city code. 3, that the applicant could use the bathroom facilities that are self-contained for up to the first 2 years. So with that scenario, the applicant is going to have a plan to construct and during the 2021 season most likely in order to be ready for that 2022 season, which I state in condition 4 that there will be permanent sanitary facilities prior to operation in the 2022 season. 5 is that the applicant would get building permits as necessary. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are more standard conditions we set on all conditional use permits. So 6, the applicant will file an annual report. 7, the applicant will meet with city staff as requested for on-site inspections. 8, if there's a change in use, a new conditional use permit must be obtained or this one must be amended. And 9, the permit will expire automatically if the use is interrupted for at least a year. And 10, if the applicant does not provide documentation to the city, for instance, for the sanitary facilities, the city could, that could be grounds for the city to revoke the permit. That's the end of my staff report, and I'll just note the applicant is in the audience, so we can invite him to come up and talk about his application further with the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Alrighty, I will go ahead at this time and ask for anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this. Do you want a motion first? We get a motion first then, I guess, for resolution PZ 2020-03?
Vice Chair.
Yes.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution PZ 2020-03.
Thank you.
Second?
Thanks. Now, sir, would you like to come give us a presentation or be available to answer any questions if the commission has any? Thank you. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Commissioner McIntyre?
Looking at the pictures on the bathroom facilities, how many bathrooms are there in each structure? And how is it determined that it looks like you're going to have 2 of these facilities, or 2 of these structures. How is it determined that the 2 would be sufficient for the 60 RVs and tents that you plan to have there?
Excuse me, Mr. Hyde, could I have you come up to the podium, please, and state your name and address for the record for us?
Sure, Ron Hyde, 2270 Royal Street, Kenai, Alaska.
Thank you.
And to answer your question, there may be more stalls in each unit. So there could be, in that particular unit, there could be 4 doors and 4 stalls. The system that we showed you there is through another one of my companies. We designed remote camps. And so that system is used in some of those deployable camps. The colors and so on would not be that color. It would be more earth tones and fall in alignment with the surrounding area. And what they are designed to do is to have a large holding tank under them, and then one of the pumping services would come out on a regular basis and just pump them out. So it would be above ground self-contained system with a number of stalls that's adequate for the area there. That's kind of what we're looking at right now until we can determine where we want to put the permanent ones in conjunction with where the final footprint is. So we wanted this flexibility in the beginning because we don't know how successful the first 2 will be. But we wanted, and we didn't know once we start.
Yes. Is there a formula that you use to decide, okay, for 60-some RVs, we need 4 of these, or we need 2 of these, or?
Yeah, if you look at the
I have one other question, and that is, it says in the staff report that right now a dump station is not planned for the time being. If they decided to put in a dump station, would that mean that the conditional use permit would have to come back before this board, or how would that be handled?
I'm gonna let staff answer that.
So the conditional use permit states that the city has to have a plan for the permanent facilities. So I suppose there is some flexibility because it just says that we don't want anything temporary after the first 2 years. But it doesn't specify whether or not there would or would not be a dump station. So I suppose as long as there's a plan that aligns with the use proposed and the number of sites isn't changing, it wouldn't come back to the commission. If there is a significant change, then there would be. I'll just add one other thing about how the 2 years was thought to be an appropriate amount of time. That's what someone who has a building permit or even one of our lessees, they have 2 years to construct their improvements. So we thought that was an appropriate amount of time to give, and it was a compromise between not wanting permanent structures that are temporary like this, while still allowing this business to develop in Kenai and move forward with the first year or two.
And then by dump station, I guess I'm thinking an RV dump station where they would dump their facility.
Yeah, and we're looking into it, but I mean,
Staff, did you have any more comments?
Yes, yeah, I was just going to add on the dump station. That could be a condition if the commission feels it would add to the permit or help the administration of it. You could add a condition that just says that the applicant would address whether or not there would be a dump station or it would have an appropriate plan. I mean, it's kind of covered with the federal state of Alaska local regulations since DEC does a lot of that, but you could add something that specifically addressed the dump station.
Do you anticipate a lot of fish processing, and do you have any sort of provisions for that?
there will be no fish coming outside.
Oh, there's no fish, okay.
Commissioner Halstead?
Thank you. So I have a concern with, not necessarily with the project, but the road that runs, not necessarily parallel, but alongside Cannery Road is Bowpicker Lane, and that is not really a road. I grew up off of Setnet, and it was always a point of contention with a lot of the traffic in the summertime that would kind of bypass Cannery Road and go down Setnet and down Bowpicker and kick up a lot of dust and dirt. And that being not a well-maintained road, and we're adding more traffic to that area, I'm thinking more on a recreational level. Is that something that we've planned for in creating, I guess, a better maintained road, or maintaining that, or blocking that off, or preventing that issue with the neighbors? And if not, when we send out notifications of this, Was that neighborhood notified in that radius? Because they might be far enough away that they did not get notification.
It's my understanding that that road is already blocked. Is that correct?
Well, it's not really stopping people from going up and down it. I mean, I wouldn't be driving my wife's car down it, but if
Four-wheelers run rampant there.
four-wheelers or lifted trucks, or, I mean, you're familiar enough with the area that, I mean, there is enough going down there that it does cause issues with neighbors. And again, it's not a problem with the project other than you're increasing activity in that area.
Is that even an access point for your property? I don't even think you're, on the diagrams I saw, I didn't see that was an access point.
We're all just on County Road and into that private gate, so we don't use public at all.
I didn't think so. Okay. I just had one quick question, and, addition to the, RV sites, you also mentioned a boat launch. Is that something that's only gonna be offered to your guests, or is that something you'll have open to the general public? Thank you. Commissioner Askin?
My understanding is that PRL and the Cannery Lodge have closed. How is that gonna impact the,
A lot of rumors in town.
well, I know the people that got let go, so
Yeah,
it's,
yeah. So Cannery Lodge there's two things that have happened. PRL Logistics is still an ongoing entity. It's not closed, it's not bankrupt, it's not any of those things. I have reduced the amount of overhead that we've had to endure over the last number of years waiting for projects to mature, both up on the slope and down here.
thank you.
Any other discussion? Any other questions, comments?
Vice Chair?
Yes.
I just have a comment. You know, I assume that the city of Kenai is going to issue building permits for their construction of restrooms and such, and I'm sure that they will meet code. And the code will determine the minimum number of facilities that'll be required. So I feel confident that that will take care of that issue.
I just wanted to comment that I think it sounds like a pretty exciting project. I'm excited to see it come to Kenai, and I think it was very well thought out. And I agree with staff's findings and standards are met. And so for that reason, I'll be voting yes on it. Commissioner Holsted?
Thank you. I also think I'll be voting in favor of this. I like the idea of the growth in that particular area, and I know there's been a lot of different things that have tried, and I like the thought of that getting a little bit more seasonally, commercial getting more life down in that area. My concerns with that street, I think, are gonna be, probably not warranted, but, I wish you the best, and I think that'll be a great project as well.
Yes.
I also agree. I think it's a great project. Thanks for taking the initiative on this and keeping economic development going.
I like the fact that it's gonna be back off of Cannery. There was some years ago where, there was an attempt to try to make one right out in front of the whole VIP subdivision, and I like a lot better. You're not gonna make Watergate a, public road though, right?
With that, I will go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes?
Commissioner Springer,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Askin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And there is a 15-day appeal process. If for any reason you need to appeal, you can go ahead and follow up with the city for that process. Thank you so much for coming out. Alrighty, that is going to move us on to item G, unfinished business. Seeing none, we'll move on to H, new business. I have post-conference discussion for 2020 Alaska Planning Conference, collaborating for resilient communities. I will go ahead and open it for discussion at this time. Staff, would you like to lead us?
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair Fikes. I just wanted to, I included just the agenda and the session topics. I just wanted to speak briefly to the conference, and sometimes I think it's useful just to see what people are talking about, just to see the full session topics for the whole commission. And so I attended I'm on the board, I'm the Region 3, so that's the Kenai Peninsula representative on the, let's see, I guess the full title would be the Alaska Planning Association Alaska State Chapter Board. And so we had our board retreat on Sunday. And so I just wanted to hear how the planning commissioner training went, since I was at the board retreat. And then I wanted to note there's a new chapter president, Shelley Wade, and I thought she did a really good job sort of engaging the attendees, and she's tried to include more tribal representation at the conference as well. And so Commissioner Askin attended the Monday and Tuesday sessions. I did as well. And then Commissioners Halsted, McIntyre, and Fikes were at the Planning Commissioner training. So I thought if you could, those who attended, just say a brief blurb. And I just wanted to just call out two of the sessions I attended that I enjoyed the most. Let's see, I had them starred. One was for a corridor in Kodiak. It was redeveloping the Mill Bay Road corridor. Perhaps I liked it because I spent some time in Kodiak, but I think because it was for a smaller community, and it was a bit different than a downtown core where it was just on this corridor leading away from downtown, and they did that because the downtown in Kodiak is within a tsunami zone. And so I thought that was interesting just to hear how they organized stakeholders for that. And a lot of the focus areas I thought may translate to Kenai were there's some industrial uses and some vacant parcels in the corridor, and how to still get the industries there while encouraging some commercial development and a balanced approach for transport options for both drivers and pedestrians. And then I also, on the flip side, I did also enjoy the one on downtown Anchorage. So this one was for commercial core downtown Anchorage. They've added some housing, but I also really liked that it included a discussion of ways that Anchorage has tried to use their public spaces, particularly the town square. They've had all sorts of events in there, like movie nights and music, and I thought that was an inspiring talk that was given as well, because it was, well, I guess the title of the session was Revitalization Through Housing and Placemaking, and so I liked that it was, it touched on placemaking in addition to just the code changes that spurred or made the housing work out financially for the developer. So anyway, that was my little recap of the conference, and if the 4 commissioners who attended could just speak briefly on your experience, or maybe just 1 or 2 things that you got out of attending. That's all I envisioned for this discussion tonight.
Thank you, Planner Appleby. I'll go ahead and start us off, I guess. I attended on Sunday for the trainer one. I guess my thoughts were, it was definitely great to be there with the rest of the group as far as the representatives from the Commission for Kenai City, as well as the borough had a nice representation of folks. So it was a great opportunity to be able to network with some of the borough folks and talk to them one-on-one. You don't always get that opportunity when you're sitting at the dais at commission time, so that was greatly appreciated. We did spend the majority of the day with kind of a less than desirable speaker who wasn't very well prepared or didn't have very good lighting. He seemed to repeat his slides quite a bit and was having difficulty with his presentation. So it was difficult for me to follow. So that would have been a different choice, might have been more helpful. And then they weren't able to serve breakfast or any kind of food, so everybody woke up and spent 6-7 hours in the conference room with no real food until lunchtime. So that was kind of disappointing for people's blood sugar levels. Other than those setbacks, the nice thing that I did enjoy was the role playing, and just as a suggestion maybe to the next group that plans next year is if, for us folks that sit on the commission, I enjoy the workshops and they're interesting, but I would like to see more of the active role playing. And if we could start the day with that role playing and follow it up with some kind of a session afterwards of this is how Anchorage does theirs, this is how Wasilla might do theirs. You know, have that back and forth collaboration so that we can all kind of gain some traction and experience and skill set, I think would be helpful to myself or whatever. But I'm very grateful to the city for the opportunity to go, so thank you very much. Next, Commissioner Halstead.
Yes, so I also thought that the main speaker there was lacking. I wasn't sure if it was the lack of food and the 14 cups of coffee that I had that was doing me in, but I did like the kind of the beginning and definitely the role playing at the end. What they'd wound up doing was taking actual cases that the city of Anchorage had done and put those into a scripted form, and they had us set up as a mock council and a mock people that had issues, and you got to play out that whole thing. One of the things that I noticed, which Kenai does differently, is when we make a motion, or when a what do you want to call that? When something comes up, it'll go through the staff report, and then the person presenting has an opportunity to speak before we make a motion to approve it. And so I was the mock chair because I like the sound of my own voice apparently, and that was one thing that got me. Is like, oh, I thought we had to move to approve it before the person said, oh, no, and then I noticed it again today. It was like, oh, well, yeah, that is how we do it. So and it's just more of this is how Kenai does it versus that's how Anchorage does it or Fairbanks. But one of the other things was it was nice to see some of the smaller representatives, like Unalaska was there. There was a lady, and there were several times that she had spoken up, like we're getting ready to do our comprehensive plan. If anyone just got done going through that, could just speak with me. And then during the breaks, I noticed that a lot of those people wound up going over to her, and it was nice to see all of the different communities kind of go to help and provide her with a lot of resources. So that was very good. And yeah, it was a great meeting. I noticed a lot of admin there, which is I missed Willie. She was there I didn't go the year before, but previously she was there. So definitely missed you. And yeah, thank you again for the opportunity.
Well, this is Commissioner McIntyre, and I think that sort of echoing the afternoon speaker was, I think, in an unfortunate slot. People come back from lunch, they get a little sleepy. He had a real soft voice, and his job was to cover a lot of legalese, which is not the most exciting topic on the best of days. And so it was challenging, and it was a dark room and warm. And so anyway, that all said, I did like his discussion of ex parte and his clarification of how challenging that can be in a rural setting and how important it is to, under the Open Meetings Act, to not engage in discussions with people outside of this setting or outside of the meetings, but rather to refer them. He is here rather than to corner you somewhere in a Fred Meyer's or wherever, which has happened to me in the past. So I always appreciate that clarification. I also liked his comments, or appreciated the comments that he had regarding and coming before the commission. But that said, I think it also puts more emphasis on the need for site visits. Again, I know we're all busy, and I happen to have the luxury of being retired, so I have a little more time on my hands. But than those that maybe have to, show up for work every day. But to me, I often benefit from actually looking, with boots on the ground, looking at a site and seeing what exactly do they have in mind here and what are they going to do. And that was, I think, echoed in the room and by the speaker that, a two-dimensional portrayal is good, but we have to exercise due diligence in recognizing that sometimes those are not always completely accurate, or they're dated. So, I would once again advocate that for some of our more involved requests for conditional use permits, that we make an effort to go out and actually look at the site before we make a decision about it. But that's what I got out of it.
I'm going to echo everything that everybody said about the Sunday one. There was two that I attended. I only was there for Monday, but there were two sessions I attended that I was the only Kenai representative in there, and one of them was about the Unalaska airport closure after the crash there. It closed for 3 days, and it virtually just brought the town to a standstill. And so they had to make alternative plans to get food that was at the end of the runway over so that it could get to the stores. And so they used a private boat, and they got it to a private dock to get it there. And then the Cordova swim team was on that airplane that crashed. And they managed, when the NTSB came in on another Raven flight, they managed to get those kids on there. Otherwise, they could have been there for a couple weeks before they got them out. Anyway, they continue to have problems. The requirement was that 2 pilots had to have a combined 600 hours of flight time to land at that airport. These 2 pilots had 100. They landed with the wind, which you never do. And so they wound up 1,500 feet, touching down 1,500 feet on a 4,000-foot runway, and then they couldn't stop. And that's why they went in right at the intersection where you either go to the town, the cannery, or the airport. So, and then they had to bring in a big crane. And then in the midst of all of this, Raven Air had bought Penn Air. And so there was that whole transition moving over to Raven. And now Raven is talking about they're probably going to pull out all commercial operation at the end of May. And so in 9 days, the city of Unalaska managed to get all the permits that they needed to act as a charter business. So they are the ones that are pretty much managing the people coming and going. Flights have gone from $1,100 to $1,300, and oftentimes there's a 5 to 10 wait period. It's a wait list, and they have to wait to get on the plane. And the fishing industry, there's just like no working together. So the fishing industry started chartering their own people, chartering planes to bring their people down, and but isn't sharing with the city and vice versa. So people that are needing medical attention, they're having to play the emergency card, and it's a mess. They're working really hard to try to find alternatives to flying people. They're 800 miles from Anchorage. It's expensive anyway, and there's people that are needing to go in and out on regular intervals, and they're hoping to find an alternative charter business to get them going. So that's a to be continued. They're really working hard on that one. And then the other one I went to was the Coastal Hazard Mapping and Monitoring. Jacqueline Overbeck from the Alaska Division of Geological and Geophysical Survey was there, and she shared the website on the State of Alaska site where you can go in and find this information. Surprisingly, there was a lot of information not available for Kenai. There's certain things, that we, in my experience working with spill response, I know that there's been a lot of identification of hazards and archaeological sites and all of that kind of stuff, and there's some areas, especially along the western and northern borders of the state, where even villages have been relocated because of hazards of tsunamis and all that kind of stuff. So it would be, if you get a chance and can go into that State of Alaska, really good maps and stuff showing all the different hazards and potential dangers and just everything that goes into when things hit the fan, what all they're identifying. So thanks for the opportunity. There was some interesting stuff this year.
One of their highlights, Commissioner Bentz won an award as a new commissioner and a strong advocate with a nice skill set for advocating and delegating or advocating and discussing on the dais. She had some really good skill sets and discussions that she brought to the table. So, as a regular attending commissioner, it was just nice to see that one of us was recognized.
I do have one other information note. So there are vacancies on the Alaska chapter board. One of them is the planning commissioner representative. So if any of you are interested in serving on the board and potentially being more, giving more direct input on next year's conference, since that really is the main thing that the Alaska chapter does for its members every year. There is an opening, so you can either contact me or just email Shelley Wade directly if you're interested in filling that position.
Thank you. Alrighty, moving on. see. That brings us to I, pending items. We have none. Moves us on to J, reports. City Council. Councilman Glendenning. What do
Thank
you
you.
have for us today?
Well, thank you. We had a interesting meeting. It was brief. There was just one item that required quite a bit of discussion and thought, but I'll go through the agenda. We had representatives from the Alaska Permanent Capital Management, City of Kenai Permanent Funds 2019 Performance Review, and establishment of 2020 asset allocation and benchmarks. Basically what it does, it described the management of the city funds that we have. For example, we have permanent funds with airport, PU fishery, water, wastewater, things like that, and described how those funds were managed. If you have any more questions, I do have the report, and I'll be glad to put on the presentation for you. But I think sufficeth that we have great confidence in our managers, and we feel that we're well represented by this organization for management of our city funds. We enacted unanimously and accepted and appropriated a grant from the Rasmussen Foundation for the purpose and installation of security cameras for the city historical cabins in Old Town. What we had found, unfortunately, that there was mischief and vandalism that had gone on with those cabins, and some artifacts have been destroyed or messed around with, and doors left open, and it was just a unsavory, improvident thing, and so we're going to put security cameras up there, and we'll have a little more idea of what's going on there, and perhaps an appropriate response should mischief be happening. So thanks to the Rasmussen Fund for doing that. We enacted unanimously, as amended, the Kenai Municipal Code, public hearings and notification, to reduce the newspaper posting requirement. It's similar to what you folks did. Rather than having two posting, we just basically cut it back to one, and that meets all the requirements of the state. And we talked about a newspaper or not, and what we understood is that fully 20% of the people in our town don't use a computer or anything like that. The newspaper is their access. So for now, in the foreseeable future, we'll continue to use the newspaper. We adopted unanimously authorizing the purchase of real property in the Kenai Township 2018 edition for the public purpose of including the property in the bluff erosion restoration project, determining that public interest would not be served by an appraisal. In other words, we were able to buy it for just a minor amount. These are properties that have gone over the side or on the slope of the bluff, and are required for management of our bluff erosion project, but are of no use to the people that own them. And so we're able to, within a band of authorized funds, be able to acquire those. We adopted unanimously the City of Kenai Hazard Mitigation Plan, and you, of course, have gone through that, and so I don't think I need to reiterate that, but it was well thought out, and it gives us leverage with funding for not only for disasters that happen, but perhaps things that we can forecast, and it gives us access to federal funds, and improves our standing with the regulatory people. And Elizabeth has a better definition, but I spit that one out. And what we did now is we adopted a resolution supporting Alaska Bill 198. It's an act relating to aggravating factors considered in sentencing. What it was, there was a member of the I can't get all the initials, LGBTQ community who was abused and reported to the police. And it was found that in the criminal code for the state of Alaska, someone that assigns their anger to an individual or demonstrates physical violence to an individual and uses that particular social designation as an excuse to do violence. There was no aggravating factor that could be assigned by the judge at the time of sentencing. So what we did is we supported Alaska Bill 198 that assigned this aggravating factor to the other 31, 33 that are already there. And it was just a matter of addressing the need for the social recognition of these people, and perhaps in the discussion that we had here in the council room and the presentation that our city attorney made regarding the reality or how this thing would be applied, I think all here, most of them were satisfied that it was the proper thing to do. Some say it was a first step. Some say, this is it. But that's time for another discussion. The respect for these people was shown by the city. And we adopted unanimously a resolution supporting sound fisheries management practices, diversified harvest opportunities in the Cook Inlet. This was put out by Mayor Gabriel, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the supporting resolution. And this is a hot topic that we're seeing in the news, and it involves actually our way of life down here and our management of fisheries and how we look at fish populations in connection with our neighbors to the north. But here it says the Alaska Board of Fisheries is convening February 7th through 19th in Anchorage for the Upper Cook Inlet Finfish meeting. The continued health of our salmon industries, both in the Kenai River and all of Upper Cook Inlet, are dependent on the decisions made at this meeting. The Constitution of the State of Alaska obligates the state to maximize the benefit of fisheries resources to the people of the state. This requires the fisheries to be managed to maximize salmon production, something the Alaska Department of Fish and Game is tasked under 5 AAC 39.222. The only way they can achieve the maximum sustained yield for any fishery is if regulations are based on good science. The Alaska Board of Fisheries, the entity with the authority to adopt regulations, should base their decisions on recommendations of the Department of Biologists with training and the proven experience in managing Upper Cook Inlet stocks. What this does, it just asks that any decisions made by the Fish Board would include an overriding concern for the science of it. It impacts our commercial fisheries, it impacts our tourists, it impacts our PU fishery, and also impacts the fish that go up the Cook Inlet to our neighboring boroughs to the north. So with that, we gave our city manager continuing authorization to go and represent us at this meeting, and I think you heard him on the radio regarding the PU fishery and the suggestion that maybe the PU fishery be extended by 2 weeks. And that would just put a tremendous amount of overhead. It puts us squarely in the fishing business, and it's something that we don't want to be and can't reasonably do unless we up our fees or have a bonus run of fish in August. We're getting zero support from the state other than perhaps some regulatory people help us with our safety management. So this is an issue of big concern for the city. Regardless of where you fall in the fish wars, this is something that needs to be addressed scientifically. And let's see, we approved by the consent agenda, non-objection to the issuance of a new standard marijuana cultivation facility license for Majestic Gardens. Approved by the consent agenda, non-objection to the renewal of a liquor license for Main Street Tap and Grill. We introduced by the consent agenda, public hearing set for 2/19, which is next Wednesday, ordinance 3103/2020, accepting and appropriating a grant from the Alaska State Library for employee travel and training. This is something that our librarian, we have a new one now, a young lady that came over from Soldotna, Mary Joyner, left us, retired. But this is something that our library management religiously pursues, is getting funding for training for our employees. And it's so important that the employees have the updated understanding, not only of the technology, but perhaps of the publications and opportunities for actually interacting with the community. If you look on the message boards or the bulletin boards, there's just a whole lot of interaction with young children, reading, interacting with maybe guests from the community that have interests, things of interest for the children, and it's the heartbeat of our community, next to Park and Rec. And let's see, we introduced by the consent agenda, hearing set for 2/19, an ordinance accepting and appropriating a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Science Library Services passed through the State Library for employee travel and training, and my previous comments reflect that. And also, we introduced by the consent agenda a public hearing set for an ordinance 3105/2020, accepting and appropriating 2 donations from the Totem Tracers and Friends of the Community Library for the upgrade of library equipment. Part of it was during the last earthquake we had, there were some bookshelves that were a little unstable and perhaps could have been more appropriately secured, like bolted to the wall or something like that. And it's a a minor amount of money, but it's a safety issue, and we're able to find funds to support that. And then Derek Lichleiter was appointed unanimously to the Airport Commission. And with that ends my report, if anybody has a question.
All righty, well, thank you very much, Commissioner Glendenning, or Councilman Glendenning. Sorry.
I'm a planner at heart. I'm a recovering planner.
All righty, that brings us to the Kenai Borough Commission report, and that would be myself. And let's see, we met on January 27th, and the one that stood out was an ordinance for authorizing a community trail management agreement on borough land within the city of Soldotna called Sashimi Toshi Garden Trails. And what that is it's actually pretty exciting. A lot of us were pretty excited to hear this. There's a group of folks in the Soldotna area that were at a conference down in Washington, I believe, and they were tasked with the audience members to come up with some kind of a theme or something they could take back to their community to promote peace. And so these folks decided to take some seedlings that were left over after the Hiroshima bombing, and they were 2 specific trees, and husband and wife team brought these seedlings back, and they were able to have them. I'm not a botanist, so basically the seedlings took, and so they're going to start this garden, and they're going to dedicate it to vets and have a memorial garden. They'll have a Japanese tea house, and it's going to go in 3 different phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of development. It's going to take place in the backside of the Soldotna Sohai High School area, if you will. If you were to head out Marydale and then turn left onto Riverwatch, or basically go to the parking lot where it meets the parking lot in Riverwatch, there's a triangle swath of land there, and that's where they've dedicated to go ahead and put this gravel pad in as phase 1. And then eventually, like I say, they'll move into a really cool part is a crane, a giant metal sculpture crane is going to be brought in and set up, an actual bird crane. And that'll be the memorial piece that they're going to dedicate. And then eventually they're also going to have a koi pond, and like I say, a tea house. Similar, if any of you have traveled to Portland, they have a Japanese garden there as well for meditation and reflection. So just as a cool thing for our community, of course, everybody jumped on board and approved that one. And then I don't recall any other ones that really stood out. We had some plats that were reviewed and subsequently approved. Then we met again on February 10th, which was when all of us just quickly returned from our commission thing. The plat committee met at 5:30. They reviewed 5 plats and approved all of them. Then the commission went into session at 7:30, promptly had roll call, nothing on the agenda, and we quickly adjourned, 7:33. It was a quick meeting, and that was all that we had. I do have some diagrams if anybody wants to see the gardens or if anybody has any questions on that. That's gonna start breaking ground, I believe, this summer. May is when they talked about it. And they've already got a board of directors, they've got all the financing in place, it's very professionally done, so pretty exciting. They're gonna have full-on bathrooms and plumbing and everything. It's gonna be a pretty neat deal. That is all I have. If anybody else has any questions? Yes.
You might want to suggest to the garden group that they talk to the Rasmussens about some security cameras for their garden.
They do. They've got it all figured out. I was really, I mean, for something that just kind of took hold, this husband and wife team, I mean, they've got a treasurer, a president, a vice president, a full-on board of directors. They've got schematics for phase 1, 2, 3, fold-on plumbing. They do have cameras for theft and vandalism. They've got a whole thing. I mean, it was just pretty neat to see it come together so fast, so well organized. So, yeah, my hat's off to this couple.
The only reason I suggest that is that if I'm thinking of the right area where you're talking about, it's kind of out of the way, sort of back and hidden a little bit, and
Yes.
just the kind of place that would attract graffiti, I think.
Yeah, it does butt up to the high rent district, I believe, over in that Riverwatch area, so. I know there are some folks back in there that I'm pretty sure would jump on the bandwagon pretty quickly, but yes, you are correct. It is kind of an isolated area. Other than that, I don't have anything else for borough reports. We have no unfinished business. I lost my cheat sheet.
City administration.
Oh, city administration, thank you. That is part of phase 3, so I don't know how that's coming together yet. But it's all gonna be protected and weatherized. They got some kind of plan to take them, put them in the summertime, and then remove them like they do with plants and stuff, because we thought that too. Are they just gonna replace these little guys? But, oh no, they got it all worked out, where they get to hibernate and hang out and come back.
Swimming in our Kenai River, it's not a good thing.
No, it's a designated, there's a actual structure. I don't know if it's like a cement enclosure with the liner, and yeah, there's a whole schematic just for the pond, plus the pumps, plus the freezing. Yeah, they thought it all out.
All right, well, I'll jump in. Actually, growing up in Wisconsin, I remember as a child, at a friend's house, they had a koi pond in their backyard, and the koi lived in garbage cans in their basement during the winter. And I thought it was really cool because you could look in these garbage cans and they were just full of fish. So I don't know if that's their plan or not, but so I wanted to let the commission know that, actually, I don't know if this one was just went to city council, I think, but it was for the Main Street Tap and Grill, the 2 parcels that cover the parking lot and the building for the bar and the hotel. Those were leased by the city, and a sale was approved, and so that sale has been finalized. The sale was contingent upon some new investment in the property. So it's exciting that that's all finalized. And that was a direct result of a policy change that was adopted by the city to allow for the sale of 10 specific parcels. So those two, there's one other parcel that had sold. So that there's been three of the 10 have sold so far. The lessees have the opportunity to purchase through 2021. Another thing I wanted to highlight about a lands change that has spurred some action by lessees, the city adopted a standard lease form. There was a deadline given for lessees to convert if they are within the airport reserve. They have until the end of this week to convert their lease. So I have 3 in total lessees that have chosen to convert. And then I have 3 that I've been having some conversations with that are still making their final decision if they want to convert or not. And there was a news story on KSRM that I think ran today that highlighted changes to the City of Kenai Lands Code, and that we have opportunities for people. They can lease with an option to purchase, and we also have development incentives that, depending on what work is done, could allow someone to lease a parcel with credits for their lease payments for 5 years. So they, as long as they develop, they could have free rent for 5 years. So I thought that was very good that we've got some press on that, and we're seeing action by the lessees based on code that the city has adopted. And I know some of those leases and some of the code changes were before this commission, so I wanted to highlight that. Circling back to the code change for our commission's advertising, the question was brought up when the commission was considering the change, what the state minimum requirements were, and I did provide that for the council, and they discussed it briefly, just what the state requirements are. So all the state requires is one posting at the location, so it's really just the bulletin board is all the state requires. But I agree with the rationale that at least one newspaper posting I think is still appropriate at this point in time, and in the other advertising that we do. But yeah, the state requirement is just the one bulletin board tack up, which makes sense in smaller communities, particularly in remote Alaska. That one bulletin board that might be the only place really to post in the community about the meeting. The hazard mitigation plan, so now that it has been adopted by City Council and the Commission recommended that, I sent it back again to the state, and they will communicate with FEMA, and I'm hoping to get a final approval letter then in the next few weeks. So it will be totally finalized and in compliance with the federal requirements to have the hazard mitigation plan. And Council member Glendenning mentioned that having that plan in place makes us eligible for some additional grant funding. So right now we're only eligible for funds that are released after a disaster happens. So this plan makes us eligible for some pools of money before something would happen, so we could use it for more preventative things that would stop damage to city infrastructure in the event of a hazard. And we're required to update that plan every 5 years, so the commission should see this back in 2024. And then the last thing I wanted to touch upon is the capital improvement plan. So the city has drafted a capital improvement plan. I don't think there was one, so it's actually really exciting that we will actually have one. So it outlines infrastructure projects ranked in order of priority that the city wants to accomplish. So for instance, number 1 is the bluff erosion project, and they're ranked according to fund. So the city has different pools of money to spend on infrastructure. So the general fund, airport fund, water and sewer, and then there's a senior citizens fund. So anyway, that document is now in draft form, and there will be a work session. I am forgetting the date, The 19th? Okay, so on February 19th, at 5 p.m. Here. So this plan is not coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission because we don't tend to deal with infrastructure projects. As some are built, maybe something with zoning could come before, but that plan won't come directly before the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I just wanted to mention it because I think it may interest some of the commission members, even if you don't attend the meeting. Just it's online. It's linked to the meeting event. If you're interested in seeing the projects that were outlined in their priority rank, and feel free to submit comments just as a citizen of Kenai too, if you so wish to do. And that is the end of my staff report.
Thank you, Planner Appleby. Alrighty, let's see, additional public comments. Seeing no one in the audience, we'll go ahead and close that. And that brings us to commissioner comments. Commissioner Askin,
I don't have anything, thanks.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Nothing?
Commissioner Halsted,
None, thank you.
Commissioner,
Nothing pertinent.
Commissioner Springer,
I don't have anything.
Councilman Glendenning.
Okay, somebody has to say something. Anyway, just thank you for your interest, and I know when I attended these conclaves up in Anchorage for planners, I gained a lot of knowledge and insight just to see how the other half lives, and just to really look at some of these smaller municipalities and how they struggle, just trying to provide reasonableness for their citizen. It's a real challenge for them, and anything we can do to support them with information and whatnot. And Gary knows this. That's his day job. He works with folks trying to fit this in the modern world. And thanks to Diane for pointing out something of interest. Like happened over in Soldotna with that park. And I know she comes up with, say, there's a plat or something that maybe applies directly to the city of Kenai, or maybe of a parallel interest to us, and she'll reveal that to us also. And then sometimes something appears in the planning commission over at the borough that we just don't have wind of yet, and something that perhaps we should know that impacts us, and she'll alert that also, probably through Planner Appleby. So I think we have a good team here, and I'll be here next meeting, I think, is what Henry assigned me. So stand by. I'll see you again.
Thank you.
I have one closing comment. So the Alaska chapter of the American Planning Association gives out awards every year. And I actually was on the committee that got to select the awards. But the Kenai Peninsula Borough Plan won one of the planning awards. So I just wanted to point that out. And during the acceptance speech, Gary Greenberg got a shout out because Commissioner Greenberg, in his life outside of in his private practice job, did some of the GIS work, and he also contracts with the city, and so he got a thank you in front of the chapter at the luncheon. So just wanted to highlight that, and thanks for also doing good work for the city.
Thank you.
Anyone planning on not making the next meeting for February 26th?
I will not be here.
Commissioner Askin. All righty. With all that finished, we are adjourned.